original strain of the virus, the Wuhan or ancestral strain. The vaccines we're giving are 2-year-old vaccines. They have not been changed by any of the manufacturers to provide more specific protection against any of the other variants that we've had so far. While large numbers of vaccines have been given, as you can see on this slide, only 9% of people in low-income countries, as of the 3rd week in January, have actually received 1 dose. Now, it's always sad to hear about doses expiring in well-to-do countries that have had these vaccines, and that these doses are not being sent to low-income countries. We can get our internet shopping done within 24 hours from ordering to receiving that package at your doorstep. But there's no process for low-income countries to order and get their vaccines delivered from the wealthy countries. This kind of global vaccine inequity continues to run rampant, where people in some countries, of course, have now had 4 vaccinations. Yet people at high risk in other countries haven't even got their first one. Even 1 dose for people at risk in low-income countries would make a significant difference. This is why some wealthy countries such as Canada and the UK, when vaccine supplies were quite limited, opted to try to vaccinate as many people as they could with the first injection before going ahead and vaccinating a second time. Vaccine inequity is obviously an issue because the virus is going to continue to mutate until the pandemic is under better control. We saw this in India, of course, with the development of Delta, and we saw this in Southern Africa with the development of Omicron. The virus has mutated significantly since then, as I mentioned, but despite this, there's still significant protection against serious disease so far. I've mentioned this in previous videos, that it's due to the fact that when you're naturally infected or vaccinated, your body typically matures its antibody response, and it actually generates antibodies that are more broad in nature and not specific to what it's seen. Your body is trying to generate antibodies to predict future virus mutations. In addition, the T cells that we all have, which are our main defense against serious infection, they still recognize the vast majority of epitopes, or what we call regions, of the spike protein. There are about 100 epitopes on the spike protein, and just because 30 are different, your body still recognizes the other 70 if you've been vaccinated. With natural immunity, it's been shown that your T cells will recognize, of course, other parts of the virus, because you see the whole virus, and you will have developed antibodies against other parts of the virus. The vaccinated people obviously don't. That's one test we can use clinically to tell people who have been vaccinated whether they've had previous infection, if they have antibodies against parts of the nuclear or envelope antigens that the virus actually has. If you do get Omicron, this study from China demonstrated that breakthrough infection rapidly produces potent cross-reactive, broad neutralizing antibodies against different variants, including alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and Omicron. The antibodies went up markedly around day 9 through 12, and there are also cross-reactive spike and nuclear capsid T cell responses to the variants of concern I just mentioned. So with that background, what is the protection now against Omicron? Well, when you look at hospitalization data, the vaccine effectiveness of 2 doses, particularly when you get beyond 6 months of that second dose, it drops significantly. This has been seen in 3 recent studies. This table, which was put together by Dr. Eric Topol, summarizes the data. One of the studies was from the UK, another was from Southern California, and the third was CDC data that they put together. You can see the protection against hospitalization when you get beyond 4 to 6 months drops to 44, 68, and 57% respectively in the studies. If your last vaccine dose was earlier than this, you still have good protection, close to 90%. Now, if you get a 3rd dose and get boosted, those numbers will go up to 90%. Now, the studies don't look at natural immunity. The waning tends to be more noticeable in people who are older. This graph from the CDC demonstrates their data comparing vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization with Delta and comparing it to Omicron. So this data confirms, particularly in the elderly, that the 3rd vaccination is clinically helpful. In addition, none of the 3 studies looked at different age groups, which is relevant because the immune system of a healthy person under 50 is obviously going to be different than somebody over 60 with comorbidities. They're just not the same person. So the numbers in the table that I've just shown you is an average for all people across all age groups, which obviously doesn't tell the whole story. It's a lot like the infection fatality rates of this virus, which overall are 0.25%. That means 0.25% of people die and get the infection, but healthy people under 50 have a much lower rate than that, and those over 80 have a much, much higher rate, on the order of 5%, in fact, for that age group over 80. So I think that there's no question that a 3rd dose is important, especially in people over 65, the immunocompromised, and likely in people over 50 with comorbidities. Now, the benefit of healthy people under 50 getting a booster, for example, is not known and may not be present or be very marginal. In general, of course, even before vaccine, healthy people under 50 are at low risk of severe disease to begin with. So that even when they've been vaccinated twice, what's the benefit of that 3rd shot? Well, it's not to prevent severe disease, but to prevent mild disease and reduce transmission, so that in countries with limited resources, the hospitals would not be overwhelmed. Further data will be available in terms of age groups, I hope, in the coming weeks. This discussion is part of the nuance of this pandemic. Remember that we're learning about this illness and vaccines as we go, and many of our vaccines that we have decades of experience for, the vaccines that you would have received in childhood, we already knew how many injections we needed and the timing to get the optimal effect, and we don't know that in this instance. Now, data from Israel using the 4th dose of the coronavirus vaccine does provide antibody spike, but this spike is much less than what it was on the 2nd or 3rd dose. So we have the law of diminishing returns. The antibodies to Omicron only last about 3 or 4 months. Antibodies, of course, reduce your risk of mild infection, but only for a short time, whereas the memory B cells and T cells are much more long-lived, and they're the ones that protect against severe illness and death. The issue here is, what is our goal with respect to the vaccine? If it's to protect against mild infection, then you need frequent boosters with diminishing antibody levels, which is obviously not practical. In medicine, we've never given vaccines to prevent mild disease. If the goal is to prevent severe disease, we need to look at how the vaccine works in different populations of age in particular, not just overall. Unfortunately, in these studies, people who have recovered from COVID-19 were not assessed. This is unfortunate, as a significant percentage of the population has been infected, and once again they're forgotten. Remember that those people who are unfortunate enough to get infected and to go through the illness, an illness that may have given them significant symptoms or even long COVID, or had them end up in the hospital or the ICU, or unfortunately even dying, they're not getting the kind of data that they deserve. People in this situation want to know what their risks are, and we as physicians want to tell them. Some do not want to get vaccinated, while we know that a single vaccination after COVID will improve immune response to a degree, as I've said in many of my natural immunity videos. We want to know, well, how much, and is it clinically relevant? As a physician, I want to be able to give numbers, statistics, of the likelihood of someone getting really sick, needing to go to the ER, getting admitted, going to the ICU, or even dying. In North America, there's not been acknowledgement of the natural immunity. You're either vaccinated or you're not. As a physician, I see it very differently. You may too. To me, you either have a level of immunity, whether it be from vaccination or previous infection, or you don't have immunity. And you don't want to have immunity when you get this virus. That's why many countries have immunity passports and allow people who have recovered the same benefits as those who are vaccinated. Many countries have travel requirements that if you're not vaccinated, you can't come into their country. With the Omicron wave, many people have gotten infected but have not been able to get tested to confirm their infection, even though they've had typical symptoms and had significant exposure. Clinically, these people, we would say that they almost certainly had COVID-19. Now, these people can obviously not prove their immunity, even if a country allowed recovered people to enter. With respect to Omicron, we don't know whether this is going to be the end of this pandemic in wealthy countries. We obviously hope that we're getting towards the end of this. It would be foolish, I think, to predict that, although some are saying that at this point. There's no question, due to the increased transmissibility, there's going to be more immunity in the population, but whether that's sustained is another question. It's likely we're going to get other variants. In order to beat out Omicron, they're going to have to be more transmissible. Hopefully they'll be less virulent or less severe, as virulent means. Hopefully the immunity derived from vaccination and natural infection will thus prevent hospitalization and severe disease going forward, as we're going to be encountering these variants. I want to make it clear I'm not fear-mongering. I'm simply mentioning that this is probably what's going to happen. This is why I think that better vaccines are likely to be needed. The US Army, for example, is developing a pan-coronavirus vaccine, and there are oral and nasal vaccines that help block mucosal transmission. When you have vaccines that have good mucosal immunity, what happens there is we get sterilizing immunity. And this is what most people think of when we think of the word immune. If you're immune to something, you think, well, sure, I might be exposed to the virus, but when it gets in my nose or mouth, I have antibodies that are going to destroy it. I won't get sick, and I won't give it to somebody else. That's what sterilizing immunity is about, and that's hopefully what we might see with some of these vaccines going forward if we don't have any other good solutions, or if variants continue to be significant enough that people are ending up in the hospital and
Ник, ты уже год в отеле живешь. Сколько можно?
Меня там все любят.
Ты им 600 тысяч за обслуживание должен.
Ну хватит ныть.
Let's talk about anxiety and how to turn off anxiety like a switch. Now, the term anxiety comes from the Latin word, which means to strangle. Now, that makes sense. If someone's trying to strangle you, you're going to feel anxiety, right? I remember about, I don't know, probably 28 years ago, sitting in an audience, okay, on a stage, and there was a speaker. And the speaker asked me to come up and speak. Now, there was no preparation. I had a fear of public speaking, and so I was a little bit forced to come up there and speak. And I was devastated when he mentioned my name, and so everyone's clapping, yes, go up there. So I get up in pure terror, and as I'm walking to the stage, my throat starts closing up. My mouth gets dry. I get dizzy. I walk up on the stage, and I look out, and I'm completely about ready to pass out. I can't even speak. I was in a state of terror. In fact, I had the fear of public speaking so bad in college I was this close to dropping out because we had to do a speech in front of the class. So it was a big fear. So I said, that's it, I have to overcome this fear. So I went back to my practice and I started doing seminars to small groups with a slideshow that I used with this little projector where I had these little slides. I don't know if you remember those little slides that you put in the projectors now, it's all digital. So I would go through the slideshow in the dark, sitting down, okay? So that way they couldn't see how nervous I was. So then I built up to turning the light on, but for those seminars I would actually bring alcohol like champagne and cookies. That was way before keto. And that way they would actually laugh at my stupid jokes. And then I progressed and I started doing more seminars and more seminars. And after about 4,900 seminars in a row, I no longer had the fear of public speaking. So that was my little side note about my anxiety. Okay, flight or fight. This is the book that I want to show you. It's called Autonomic Nerves, okay? It's a fascinating book. And this book is all about the autonomic nervous system, which is composed of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the flight or fight. I'm going to read something to you. What is the flight or fight reaction? The flight or fight reaction is a physiological response to a real or perceived threat to one's safety. Depending on the nature of the threat, the person either mounts a defense, fight, or attempts to escape from the threat, flight. Run away, right? Both fight or flight require sudden, vigorous muscle action. The body prepares itself for action in the following ways. It's right here. You'll start having a racing heart, the blood flow goes to the muscles, start sweating, shaking, throat constricted, breathing changes, blurry, dizzy, you feel nauseous, irritation, worry, which is the feeling that something bad is going to happen, poor concentration, mind goes blank. That's what happened to me in front of all those people. You focus on the negative, right, not on the positive. And one of the problems with being in a chronic state of flight or fight is it screws up your sleep, then you're tired, and then your memory goes, okay, and then you lose your focus and you're just not productive at work. It can really affect a person on many different levels. Now, over the years in practice, I've noticed some real interesting things about certain people that have anxiety. The diet is nearly always not right, okay? They're usually consuming things that are stimulants, they're depleting them of certain nutritional factors, especially vitamin B1. And by the way, if you have anxiety, you need to be taking lots of B1. You will notice relief within 3 to 4 minutes after taking B1. In fact, you should probably get all the B vitamins as well and make sure that they're natural, not synthetic. I recommend doing nutritional yeast. That provides the best quality. So the B vitamins are one of the most important things to counter this, okay? Now, probiotics. Now, your microbes actually make B vitamins. They make a lot of B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B12, also folic acid, biotin. They make a lot of different nutrients. And not only that, they make amino acids that then can be turned into neurotransmitters like GABA, dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, melatonin, all of these neurotransmitters that help you feel calm, help you sleep at night. So if you have any problem with your gut, let's say you have some damage in your gut, you're celiac, or you've taken antibiotics before and you just don't have all the flora, or you consume foods like regular normal foods that are GMO, which by the way destroy the microbes that block the ability to make this. Now if you think about the problem with GMOs, you have this chemical called glyphosate. Glyphosate destroys certain mechanisms that make amino acids in insects and microbes. But apparently, they say it doesn't affect humans. But guess what? You have microbes that make a lot of nutrition and actually make proteins. So when you consume GMO foods, you're interfering with the flora, the gut microbes, which are indirectly going to affect these and the microbes that make B vitamins, causing you to end up being deficient in certain factors, and then now your mood's going to start to kind of go south after that. Also, artificial sweeteners can have a negative effect on your microbes in your gut. One of the best ways to get probiotics is through fermented foods like sauerkraut or other similar fermented type foods. And then we have magnesium. Magnesium is a really good mineral to help calm the adrenals down and counter anxiety. Very, very important, and I would take magnesium in higher amounts if you have anxiety. Also, you want to avoid the environmental triggers, so there's certain things in your environment. You have people, you have your work, you also have what you watch on TV, on the internet. You just want to make sure that you're not constantly reminded of things that stress you. And this is why watching the news is very, very bad with people with anxiety. So reverse that, get outside, take long walks, exercise, get lots of oxygen. Adaptogens are herbal products that really will help to increase the tolerance to stress so you can actually deal with things a lot better. If you want more information about this, I put a link down below. Check it out. All right, well, thanks for watching. And before you go, if you haven't seen my video on the stress webinar, that's a really important one to watch. It's quite long, but I put it right here. Check it out when you have some time. Hey guys, Dr. Berg here. In this short video, we're going to talk about how to kill off the blood supply to cancer. Now, there's a new concept I'm going to talk about based on this word called angiogenesis. Angio means blood vessel, genesis means the formation of something new, the creation of something new. So it's the formation of new blood vessels. Okay? So our body uses that mechanism, but the thing that's very unique with cancer is